Hey again, everybody. Well, this is Ed with another episode of Call Me Mr. Broadstreet. I have a special guest with me today, Jackson Miller from the Late Talk Show. Jackson, good to have you on my show. I know I got to be on his show on TikTok. Make sure to check it out, specifically on TikTok. We're going to make sure to link to everything below as well, where you can find him, all his various social media and everything. So I feel like I should have like some sort of welcome music. I generally don't do music on the show, but welcome aboard, Jackson. Good to have you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on the show. It's great to be here.
Excellent, excellent. Well, I'm going to go with some obvious questions here, and I guess the first one would be kind of. I know you've been doing this for a couple years now. About 2 or 3 years. Kind of, how did it all start for you when you did the show? How did you decide to start it and kick it off?
Yeah, of course. So for me, two passions kind of came together. One was my passion for late night. So obviously, I've got kind of the late night vibe here, the background, the signage, the suit, and everything. That kind of started when I was younger, and not wanting to go to bed, so I keep my mom up and pester her, and she'd be like, "All right, let's go sit on the couch," and we'd watch David Letterman until I fell asleep. Usually, she'd be the one to go to sleep first because I was just so entranced by David Letterman. And, in a way you're young and you're like, oh, this is what adults do after we go to bed. But it was some of the things of like Dave Letterman's like weird kind of humor and stupid pet tricks and the not top 10. It's like those kind of things just as a kid, I was like, this is the funniest thing I've ever seen. This is hilarious. And then as I got older, most of my friends would be watching like Sports Center or watching all these other things. And meanwhile, for me, I'm catching up on last night's episode of, The Late Show or with Craig Ferguson or Conan and things like that, watching their monologues and if they have any guests that I wanted to watch. So that was kind of how the passion for late night started. And then as COVID hit, my wife, now my girlfriend at the time, she was watching TikTok and she'd watch it as we were kind of just hanging out, not doing anything. And I see this app and, I had heard about it. And at that time, it was still like the dancing trends, all the kids coming up here and doing their dances. And I'm like, all right, that's a fad. That's so dumb. That's going to go away. Social media is stupid. And then all of a sudden she started watching these other content creators. And all of a sudden I start like recognizing and hearing them. And I'm like, oh, that person's funny. I kind of like that person. I start watching over her shoulder more. And then for me, I start thinking to myself, like, man, I wish I got to know the content creator a little bit more because their content is hilarious or educational or something like that. I'm like, I wish I knew more about them on a personal level. This is like 2021, early 2021. And then kind of a light bulb went off for me to say, well, wait a minute, why don't I take my passion for late night and kind of bring that to social media? Because at this point, these creators are just your random everyday people that would never make it on The Late Show with Colbert or Jimmy Fallon. And I thought, everyone has a story to tell. Everyone's, is just trying to be creative and pass on what they can do. So why not take my passion for late night, combine it with TikTok and social media, and hopefully kind of fill that niche and see where it goes.
Excellent. No, no, no. I mean, you've been doing good, checking out a lot of the videos, a lot of the things that you have out there. And you kind of touched upon my second question, as you kind of guess, like early influences. So I know you're going into, David Letterman, certainly Craig Ferguson. Would you kind of include like maybe like Johnny Carson with that? Or is that maybe a little bit more older school, you would
So
say?
I see Johnny Carson as kind of like the GOAT, like the founding father of late night. Like if you're going to do late night, you need to kind of know your history of where it came from. I've seen plenty of clips and things like that, but I think Johnny Carson is, I don't want to say like outdated because that demeans what he did in a way, but I think what happened was Johnny Carson set something up that was magical, because at that point celebrities were seen as these recluses who you would only see on screen or on TV, and this was a glimpse into their everyday life. And that's kind of what the door that Johnny Carson opened. And I think nowadays everyone's on Instagram, social media, all these celebrities are getting their own TikTok channels now that you kind of know who they are as people. So I think, do I take some influence from him ultimately through the people I look up to and emulate? Of course. But I think if I had to kind of rate my top three, I think number one would be Conan O'Brien. I love him, and especially what he did with like TBS of like, I'm just going to do what I want to do and I'm going to travel and make a bit out of it. Like, hilarious. I love that. I think number 2 for me would probably be like a tie between a Jon Stewart and a Trevor Noah from The Daily Show. Because again, I would see that as late night, and they were people who took serious issues and are very intelligent people and asked great questions of their guests, and as an audience member made you question things, but also added some comedy behind it. And then I think for 3, I'd probably go with like I think Craig Ferguson is there. And I think the inspiration I take from Craig is he is one of the few people that I see on the show who genuinely cared about their guest. Because you would get, people nowadays where, and again, nothing against Jimmy Fallon, Jimmy Kimmel, Colbert. If I ever met them, I'd obviously love to have a conversation with them, but it's very scripted. It's very much like, oh, tell me about this funny anecdote that you have, or what about this new movie that you're putting out? And I think with Craig Ferguson, what he did is when people sat down, guest on his show, he would like make whether it was symbolic or not, he would rip up the cards, the questions, and he'd be like, hey, how are you? Like, what have you been up to lately? What are you doing? And they might not even get to the movie clip. Like, some of the guests would have to be like, hey, I think I'm supposed to show my clip now here. And Craig was like, all right, we can roll it. But he cared more about the guest than the actual show. So all those little pieces of all these people, I kind of try to take and put into my show. And then I would say, too, maybe as an honorable mention, an aspect of it, of where I want to take the show, is Ellen DeGeneres. Kind of before we found out like who she was as a person. But the show of, like, I remember when her show first came out and I was in college, and people would literally make YouTube videos going around campus, either something funny, something really emotional, and post it on YouTube, and then like tag Ellen DeGeneres and like, Ellen, please find me. Like, this would be great. Like, watch this video, Ellen. Like, things like that, because like they saw it like as a chance for, maybe it's 15 seconds of fame, maybe it's the chance to go viral, but it's also like Ellen would bring people on who had a chance. And I think, ultimately looking at that of like, hey, I'd like to bring kind of that flavor into my show. Maybe not Ellen as an inspiration, but maybe more so as her show, of adding that kind of flavor of where I might like to take this 2, 3, 5, I don't know how many years down the road.
Excellent. Yeah. Well, no, we don't here. I'll just tear up the rest of the questions. It's
Hey, I love it. If you've got questions, I absolutely want to answer.
A little bit though. But all taking aside, I know even beforehand, as we're kind of talking before we're taping this for the folks watching out there, we touched upon the fact of wanting celebrities to be kind of a decent human being, not calling anybody out, obviously, but you want him to be a relatively decent human being, to kind of be very much kind of what you would expect of them. We all have good days, we all have bad days, and that's kind of the key. That's kind of the key. And I think with you, it's very much what you see is what you get. I mean, this is not, the feeling I get when I'm watching your videos is certainly when I got to be interviewed by you, and I appreciate it. It's very much, hey, you're trying to connect with somebody, a genuine connection, as opposed to, like you said, the scripted, bring out the spinning dogs and the whole, whatever it is, type of thing.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things, too, that Jimmy Fallon gets a bunch of flack for. Again, nothing against him, but a lot of the times he'll have a guest on and be like, wow, that's amazing. That's the coolest thing I've ever seen. I can't believe that's so incredible. And I think at first that was funny and like, oh, that's maybe who he is. But then after a while, you kind of see, like, when he brings out the guest he wants to bring out, like a Justin Timberlake, you can tell he's a much more relaxed person than, say, hey, the studio or the executive said I needed to interview you because they have a deal going on. And I try to take that as, say, I don't want to be fake. And if it gets me 1 million followers, is it worth it, though? I don't think so. Because, again, my job is to, how I see it, is to interview my guest, make them feel at ease, try to just connect with people. That's hard enough to do just in person sometimes. So to do something over TikTok or over a Zoom or anything like that, it's even harder. So it's trying to make people feel at ease, and like you said, I kind of tell people, I'm like, listen, this is what you get. This is what it is. I put out videos too randomly of like, this is me just being goofy with my dog or my wife or whatever that just comes across my mind. It's like, this is what you get as a host. Like, take it or leave it.
Yeah, exactly. Although I'll give Fallon some credit when he did have McCartney on, and you guys, of course, we're a Beatles channel, so we're going to go into some Beatles stuff, right? But he had him with the albums "Give My Regards to Broad Street," Pipes of Peace, and Tug of War, not released in that order, looking at them as a solo fan. So I'm like, okay, I'm giving some cred for that, because a lot of people just say, I love Band on the Run. And it's like, okay, and but I get what you mean. You're not trying to go for, oh, it's the greatest thing ever. Oh, it's this, it's that.
Right. Or you'll see some people now who, I'm trying to grow my channel like everyone is, if you're a content creator who wants to grow. And a lot of these people, like, focus on your hooks, or be a shock, add some shock value to it, make a fiery statement. And I'm sitting here being like, listen, I think we've got enough of that. There are plenty of content creators out there who do that. You turn on any news station, you're going to give us your hot takes. What's going to get us headlines? What's going to get us clicks? And I'm sitting here being like, I think we have enough of that in the world as it is. Let's just go to a channel where you can be interviewed and made feel like your voice, like you're being heard, just like a celebrity would on a show like that. Let's take that route. And so, I don't know. It's just some of those things, it's like, you got to do what you got to do, kind of a thing. And I'm like, well, if that's the case, I'm just going to be me. And I think I'll go further in the long run being me than I would trying to be some fake me, where then people figure out like, oh, well, you're not actually like that at all.
Exactly. It's interesting, because it is, it brings this up sort of, as, it's sort of, it's you doing something that you're passionate about. So it's almost, do you feel like it's you like in a happier place? It's you in like a more exaggerated, extroverted format versus, you on the street type of thing?
I think for me, I am exaggerated slightly in the fact of, like, there have been times where just a really bad day at work, maybe life, who knows, and I've got a show on that night, or I've got a guest on, and it's like, as much as maybe internally I'm sitting here being like, you know what, all I want to do is curl up on the couch and watch some Netflix. I'm like, no, I want to do this show because this show gives me more energy when I leave it. So I may come down and just be like, oh man, it's late at night. All I want to do is just go to bed. But I'm like, every time I get done with my show, it drives me further, and I get excited by it. So there are times where maybe at certain aspects during certain interviews or certain components of my show where, maybe I'm down to two people watching it, or maybe, if there's a guest that I have on who says something that I'm like, oh, okay, I wasn't ready for this, or whatever it may be, certain aspects might be exaggerated in that moment of, nope, everything's okay, we're having fun, this is a great interview, this is great, whatever. But overall, I think that what you see is what you get here if you were to get to know me. Maybe in the business world, I'm not going to sit down with someone and be like, hey, so what inspires you to make I'm probably not going to be as outgoing in my job. But if you're like my friend, close friend, or family, the host that I am on the show is exactly who I am, like you said, anywhere that you would see me.
Excellent. Well, it just I just want to go ahead and tap into, with the show, of course. What about like some of the latest guests that you think you would have on? I know you've talked about, just wanting to interview regular people, content creators. What type of folks do you have lined up, coming out on your show in the next, few weeks or so after this will be, airing?
Yes, of course. Some of the ones that I've have coming up, I have a crypto. I'll call him like a crypto guy, a crypto finance guy. He's coming on later this week. I have got a kind of a rapper musician coming on. I think Friday on the show. So that would be what, the 8th or 9th of March. And then next week, I've got a potential guest who wants to talk about like pets and animals and the benefits of adopting them and training them correctly. Those are just a couple of them that jump to my mind. A lot of people, I've had people reach out to me that say, hey, I'd love to be on the show. And it's maybe a message or two back and forth. And sure, when do you want to come on? What about this date? And sometimes it goes silent. And for me, I'm like, as much as I want to have everyone on the show, I also don't want to be hounding them every other day to be like, when do you want to come on the show? When do you want to come on the show? Because it's like, if they took the effort to say that they want to come on, there's some kind of desire there. And don't be the one who's going to hound them continually, because maybe they're just going through a patch where they're like, listen, I can't go on my channel right now, but I'd love to still be on your show at some point. great, then come on whenever you're ready. And usually those people will reach out at some point later on, and then have them on the show. But those are some of the upcoming people that we have planned for interviews in the next couple weeks.
Excellent, excellent. Well, then this leads me into kind of when things go right, when things go wrong. Of course, how do you generally tend to deal with, let's say either you get a negative message, negative feedback, or let's say an interview's not quite going, as you think it would. Something kind of, like you said, kind of takes a detour. What are some of the things that help you to kind of cope with it, think on your feet? Because I'm sure that has to happen a lot too with the unexpected.
It does. It does. The unexpected for sure. I would say with that question, the first part, negative comments, negative things like that. I would say I am very lucky with the regular guest and regular viewers that I have. I interviewed someone about 6 months ago, and she mentioned that the content creator really drives the channel. If you're a positive person, you're going to attract like-minded people. If you're coming on there and your sole goal is to literally just spew hate and insult people, those are the people that you're going to attract to that as well. So for me, I feel very lucky for my regular viewers, mostly being very positive, engaging, outgoing, things like that. Occasionally being live, you will get someone who comes in there and be like, hey, you're a Carson Daly ripoff, or nice job, Matt Gates lookalike, things like that. And usually, I try to deflect with humor, because for me, it's a defense mechanism. I usually always resort to, self-deprecating humor. So it's either something along the lines of like, wow, that's the nicest thing anyone said to me all day. Or, wow, actually, I did enter a contest last week and I took 3rd place. So you should see the other guys, things like that, trying to engage. I like to think I'm relatively quick-witted with some of those things. Some of them I can think up in the spot. Other times it's just a matter of like, hey, you know what? You're not wrong. I haven't showered in a week, so that's probably what's leading up to it. So different things like that. Usually it's self-deprecating, because I've actually won a couple people over that way, where it was negative comment, I give a response, negative comment, I give another response, and then next thing you know, that person follows me. Like so-and-so follows, and it's like, oh, okay. Some people just want that to be that troll because their username is username guy123, and they feel like, hey, no one can say anything to me. No one knows that it's John Smith from Chicago, Illinois making this comment. And sometimes it's just engaging with them, and they're like, oh, okay, not the reaction I was looking for, but you're not that bad of a guy. So that's what I like to do. Sometimes I have a couple moderators on my channel, and if they're just getting too rowdy, or all of a sudden it gets like way too political, I sometimes will just see my moderator be like, yep, you're muted, or yep, you're banned. Like, not the time or place for that. So that's kind of how I deal with negative comments or things like that. Trying with humor. Interviews are a little harder. I do my best when I find people. If they say, hey, I'd love to be on your show, I usually check out their channel beforehand and try to get a sense of kind of who they are. Or usually, not to give away an industry secret, but I'll send a message beforehand to be like, hey, is there anything specific you wanted to talk about? Maybe they're a musician and they've got an upcoming EP or an upcoming song, or maybe they're just like, hey, yeah, I just posted a video the other day about this. Can we talk about that? And so usually I try to bring those things up. But I have had my fair share of individuals who just sometimes, and again, I'm not always great at this, but having conversations are tough. And sometimes, whether it's a question being asked, whether it's, hey, what do you think? And they ramble on, similar to kind of what I'm doing here of, yeah, I'll take your question now, give me another 10 minutes and I'll give you an answer. But it's some of those times as a host where you kind of got to, zig and zag, duck and weave with them. And there have been times where I've had interviews on, I'm not going to name any names, that they say something so random or so out of left field that I just never would have thought that would be what it is. And so instead of being like, what are you talking about? It's oh, really? Like, tell me more. And maybe it's playing a devil's advocate. Like, I've had a couple conspiracy theorists come on, and whether that's their whole thing or whether they've got one specific topic, it's usually me being like, okay, let me play devil advocate here of like, okay, you have your conspiracy theory. I'm not going to tell you that I think it's dumb because of X, Y, or Z, but I'm going to play into it because this is something that you clearly feel passionate about. Tell me where that passion comes from. Tell me why you feel that way. How do you interact with other people who don't think of that conspiracy theory? So those kind of the things I usually try to lean into, be like, okay, this is where the roller coaster is going right now. I'm on board with this whole thing. I'm not just going to end the interview because I didn't feel like it was going the way I wanted it to. I'm going to keep going and say, oh, all right, that's the rabbit hole we're going down now, where I'm attached at the hip at this point. Let's do it. And just going along with it, because sometimes you never know where that's going to lead, for better or worse.
No, excellent. And again, it's good to to have a conversation. Well, first of all, you discovered my alternate username, so I'm going to have to go ahead and change that. Noted that.
Shoot, that's you. I knew it.
Sorry, folks out there. I get it. You get all the random users. Yeah, I know. You know what? I'll make a note to myself here. My attempt at some comedy here. Well,
yeah.
I guess this goes into my next topic, kind of favorite types of interviews to do. I know you interview a lot of folks out there, like I said, from all walks of life. Do you have any more preference for, let's say, more movies, music versus sports and construction, for example, or is it just really, as you said, random topics that come up, you're interviewing everybody? Do you have any sort of preferences?
I think for me, a preference is something that I know nothing about. So, like, for example, I've had musicians on, and ever since I was younger, I've always wanted to play like piano, guitar. Like, I literally have a keyboard downstairs. I've got a guitar, acoustic guitar downstairs. And there have been times where I've tried to teach myself how to play. And sure, I can strum out the basic chords. But when I get musicians on and they just play a song and can sing and sound amazing, I'm just super jealous of that because it's something that I don't have. I've had people on, who was one that was recent? I'm totally blanking on it, but like things that I don't know. An individual who wants to preserve monarch butterflies because they're hard to preserve. They're not on the endangered species list because they're seen as like an insect, and there are other species that we should be protecting instead. Save the polar bears. I agree, don't get me wrong, but like if a thing is endangered because of statistics, you can't just exclude it from the list because it's a butterfly and you don't care about it. So she's literally making a greenhouse. And so to interview her, she's like, this is my passion. I'd really like to talk about this. I learned about monarch butterflies, and I learned not only in my own kind of research, so I didn't sound like a complete idiot talking to her, but also from her as well. So those kind of the topics where I feel like not only am I having fun interviewing someone, but I'm getting enriched by the experience of like, hey, I've got a funny story for you, or I've got this kind of thing that's going on. It's like, hey, I try to see myself as the person watching, the viewer, and I'm like, hey, if you're teaching me about, I've had a fitness instructor on. And so for me, not only I'm asking, as the audience, but I'm asking as myself as well of like, hey, what's the theory on this? I've heard a lot about the keto diet or the Mediterranean diet. Do those actually work? Like, what's in a diet? And getting the actual response from someone who's not trying to sell me, a prescription plan or not, subscription plan, or not trying to sell me, well, if you want to hear my answer, you got to like, follow, and subscribe. It's I feel like I'm getting clean and honest answers from them. And so those are kind of the interviews that I like to have of in a way, I feel like I'm sitting down with a friend at a bar, a campfire, at a movie that's about to start, and we're just having fun. And those are the interviews that I just try to have. It's people who want to be on the show. I've met some incredibly nice people that much like yourself, that we probably our paths would have never crossed in real life, but because of the magic of social media, TikTok, YouTube, things like this, we now get to sit down multiple times and interact and connect with, and those are things that I'm glad that we live in the time that we are, because I get to have these experiences.
Excellent. Well, no, thank you. Well, again, you're right at the dining room table. Another industry secret. Sorry, folks, but besides, all the memorabilia behind me, and I like some of the stuff you brought on. Like, I know you've done stuff in the past. Like, oh, here's something new I learned about stoplights. I was actually just watching the stoplights clip a little bit before, coming on. Like, why is it, red, yellow, green? Why is that? That's kind of an interesting factoid. Or the news of the week. I kind of like how you do the news of the week, and you're kind of doing a kind of beatbox rap sort of like news of the week, like a. Looks
trying
like Oliver style. Trying.
Yeah. It's one of those things where, again, I they say as a content creator, do what you're passionate about. And for me, and I kind of hinted at it there, it's always been about learning, and it's always kind of been about keeping up with kind of what's going on, because not to make it like a generational thing at all, but like sometimes I just feel like we're so self-absorbed in like what's going on in our own world and what's happening that we're losing sight of, hey, did you know this happened? Or like I said, you see stoplights every day, and I had a whole series. I want to get back to that at some point, of learning, of just like, what about the phrase like to give someone the cold shoulder? Like, I'm sure you've heard it, you've read it in literature. Like, when was that phrase invented? What does it mean? Or one that I had never did is the term hungover. Why do we say that? And it's because sailors who would come from from being at sea for months, they'd come ashore and they'd spend all their money just drunk, and they'd spend it all that they wouldn't have anywhere to go. So they would literally pay like a shilling or a penny essentially, and they would sleep on a rope. Like, they'd stand and they'd literally just kind of like sleep leaning against that rope for the night. So they would be hung over the rope. And that's how it was, the term hungover was kind of started. So things like that, where I'm just like, how do these things that we say every day, but we don't know the meaning of, or why stoplights are like they are, or what's even happening in the news? So things like that, I try to cover in a way that's a little different, of me sitting down and be like, all right, in today's news, President Biden and former President Trump won Super Tuesday. Okay, great. But is there a fun way that we can do it? And again, I'm probably whiter than vanilla ice, but I want to try something different, where people can tune in at the end of the week and be like, hey, did I miss anything that maybe wasn't covered by your just always politics? Like, what other things are going on that maybe I might not find out, whether it's in the same country or worldwide?
Excellent. Well, and for a second, felt like you were channeling Walter Cronkite there, which is a compliment, sir. It's a compliment. Very much like, yes, and that is the way it is in this state, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. How
Yeah.
it was way back in the '60s. Well, speaking of the '60s, here we go. A little segue. See, I'm learning as I go along.
There you go.
My TWA stuff. By the way, highly recommend that hotel if you love a good retro '60s vibe. When I went to the Fest for Beatles fans, really cool at the JFK.
Yeah.
New York City.
Yeah. And again, I don't want to derail you at all, but how was that? Because I know last time we talked, you had said you booked it and you were ready and excited for it. I mean, come on, you got to share some details,
okay,
right?
I'll share some details. So real quick, before we get to the quiz, spoiler alert, folks, there's a quiz out there. It was really fun. The really quick version is it's right next to the JetBlue gate, so that's where the TWA airport is. It's New York prices, of course, and got to meet Lawrence Druber, Steve Hawley, got to contact Lawrence Druber, got to interview him on the channel. Check out that previous video, shameless plug, I know. It was a lot of fun, just meeting folks connected with the Beatles story. A heck of a lot of fun. I had a blast. I would definitely do it again in a heartbeat. They have one in Chicago, though I'm a little tapped out because of the memorabilia room. So that was, you're spending some cash. You're spending some cash. Stuff.
Yeah, I would imagine, not only just for the tickets and the hotel and flights to get there, but now all of a sudden you're like, well, I mean, I'm here. I might as well get a few memorabilia while I'm here.
Especially the Broad Street stuff here. That's
Yes.
a 40-year-old film. There's a lot of stuff I'm collecting, hence the name. But other stuff too, other stuff there. Well, speaking of, we got a little Beatles quiz. So here's how it's going to go. The points don't matter. The prizes don't matter either. There's no prizes, no points. It's just bragging rights. It's just to have some fun. Actually, inspired by you a little bit, so sort of borrowed. Sorry about that, but
that's all right. Hey, it's
borrow
video. To your heart's content. I think we all kind of borrow in our own way.
The same. Obviously, if you anything from here, more than welcome to it. More than welcome at all, Jackson. So let me do this here first. All right, Beatles quiz. Drum roll, please. We don't have a drum roll. Don't have that type of budget. All right, here we go. So this is a multiple choice one. The last solo year for a top 10 hit in the U.S., solo hit by Paul McCartney and John Lennon. Was it 1974, 1978, 1982, 1984?
I think I'm wrong, but I'm gonna go with for some reason 82 is sticking out to me.
Close. 1984.
84. Okay.
1984, I'll give you the answer with that. Nobody Told Me, number 5 hit off of John Lennon's posthumous album, Milk and Honey, released as a single in January of that year. No More Lonely Nights from, give my regards to Broad Street,
Sure.
made number 6 in the US charts, October, November of 1984. In fact, a quick shout out to someone who's a mutual connection of ours, Chanel. Ramirez got this for me. Thank you, Chanel. I wanted to do a quick shout out. And the t-shirt as well. We'll do a little bit of that real quick. So thank you, because I know she's also got her YouTube channel. Check it out and check her out on TikTok as well. Love to promote, the younger fans, everybody. Love to promote everybody. All right. Second one. This one might be a little bit easier, because these are varying difficulties. 4 questions, 4 Beatles. But which film was released first? Help or Hard Day's Night?
I've seen parts of Hard Day's Night. I don't know if I've seen Help, and I believe Hard Day's Night is like the black and white, old school. So I'm gonna go with that one. I'm gonna go Hard Day's Night.
Yes. 1,000% on that one. That's 1,000 points right there. Yeah. 1,000,000 points, but the points.
Million points. Yes.
On whose line is it anyway? Yeah. Right. Hard Day's Night, 1964. Help, 1965. Help is sort of the sequel. They get a little bit more cash. They're like, well, okay, let's write something now where we get to travel a little bit more.
Sure. Right now that we got the first one out of the way, let's see if we can make a little bit more money.
And to keep it family friendly on here, but let's just say other, shall we say indulgences too? We'll just leave it at that. Yeah.
Sure.
Green was the color till they said.
There you go. that would do it. That sometimes you got to get in that creative mindset.
There you go. Yep, you definitely have to keep the creative juices flowing. All right, so next question. This has to do with one single Beatle, so you have 1 in 4 shot of this one. Okay. Which solo Beatle had both the first solo number 1 and the last solo number 1 song in the United States? Both the first and the last.
First and the last. Mm-hmm. I think it's got to be. I'm just trying to think, because I know, going through all the songs that I know of them solo, but my guess is going to be Paul. I just think he's got a longer music career. I'm going to go with Paul.
No, actually, you'd be surprised. No, he's really? A lot of top 10 hits. He's almost hit the number 1 with 4 or 5 Seconds from 2015. He did have a number 1 album in 2018 with Egypt Station, which I was happy to report and see. But no, as far as songs go, that would be George Harrison.
Really?
First number 1 song, My Sweet Lord, 1970. That's the first single, first solo number 1. By a Beatle. He's doing it's the first number 1. And last number 1, Got My Mind Set on You.
Set on You.
1987.
Really?
That song was a cover song of a Rudy Clark song. It's actually not written by George. I didn't find that out 2 years later. It's a cover of a 1962 song. 1962 version is definitely different from the George version we all know.
Right. George is a little bit more pop, more rock to it. That I've Got My Mind Set on You was more kind of more of kind of a melody, kind of a sweeter, like singing to your loved one kind of a thing, versus George is really I love that song too. And I thought about it. I thought, well, wait a minute. I think Paul, I mean, just the length of his career is like he's got to have a song after that one. But interesting, couple that were up there, but not number 1s. Very cool.
A lot of top 10s and stuff. Yes, certainly. I mean, they're only group I can think of, and that's been discussed on other shows where they've got each member has had a top 10 hit on their own. Can't think of any other band, even the Rolling Stones. As much as I love them, it wasn't like Charlie Watts had a top 10 hit in like 1977 or something like that. I mean, God,
right. But I think the only little piece of trivia, again, I don't want to get too far off the Beatles, but I think Queen is the only band where each member has had a number 1 hit. Potentially. Again, you might want to fact check me on that one, but again, depending on what they wrote, because I think Brian May wrote We Will Rock You, the drummer wrote like Bicycle Race or things like that. So like different things, maybe. I could be wrong. I could just be making stuff up and losing all of my credibility.
No,
But
no, no. Actually, so you're saying like as a group, kind of each had a number one hit within the group as the group recording and
true, right? But yeah, they each wrote. I guess I would say they each wrote a number one song. So maybe, like you said, maybe not as a solo career, but they each member of the band has
I can see
written
that.
a number one. That's probably where the clarification is on that one.
Yeah, like Another One Bites the Dust, I think was at least a top 10, if not a number one song. That
Yep.
was a huge, massive song. Probably stuff over in England that maybe it didn't do well over here for some weird reason, which, I mean, for going a little bit off track for a second here, but for my money, Hammer to Fall. That is a good song, man.
Yeah.
I'm surprised that one didn't chart much higher.
Yeah, that's a good point. Now you bring that one up, I think I love listening to bands like their deep cuts in a way, you know, their side B of the album, because sometimes you hear their number one hits, and those are the ones that kind of hook people in. Of like, hey, here's like the popular songs of the Beatles or the popular songs of Queen, but it is fun to hear kind of their other songs that they threw on there and just be like, wow, that was a really random song, but I really kind of like it.
Yeah, and even sometimes with the other songs. Well, here's the last question. So 4 questions, 4 Beatles. Now here we go. This one is a tiny bit more obscure, but I think if you think it through, I think you're going to get this one. I have faith in you. I definitely. And again, we'll see what the points amount to at the end of this one. So in 1978, Ringo did a TV special. It was then promoting his album Bad Boy. The special was called Ogni or Rats. Ringo Starr spelled backwards. 1978 TV variety special, Art Carney, a whole bunch of people on there. So a certain Star Wars cast member was a guest on the show. Name the cast member. So you've got about a 1 in 3 shot with this one.
Right. 78.
78.
Yeah. I know I'm going to be wrong on this one, but for some reason, I'm picturing this as a possibility. I don't think it's right, but is it? I'm just going to say it anyway. I'm probably wrong. Is it Peter Mayhew, the guy who played Chewbacca?
No, that would have been interesting. You know, now that I think about it, I gotta. In some alternate universe, no, it was actually. And if I would have changed the question a little bit, you would have gotten it right away. It was Carrie Fisher.
Really? Okay.
Yes,
very cool.
Carrie Fisher. She's also in the "You're 16, You're Beautiful in Your Mind" cover that Ringo does around that time period in the music video, which is funny because she was not 16 at the time, but that's a whole other.
Yeah, that's a different story.
That's a whole other topic. But
yeah,
Carrie,
right.
We miss you. We love you.
We're not going to be able to cover that quite here.
Yes, no. We're not quite going down that road. But a very, very innocent, or sort of a more innocent take at the time, I suppose. But yeah, that was part of it, and also a certain member of Three's Company was on there. John Ritter was in the TV special.
Really? Wow.
He was playing a record exec. Ringo's kind of coming along, goes, "Oh yeah, Ringo, here's your latest gold record." The special's not readily commercially available. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. But
sure.
I'm sure people can sort of find it if you really want to look it up on various platforms.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was kind of an interesting. It's almost kind of like a fever dream.
Right.
Album didn't do super great commercially, unfortunately, but yeah, that's kind of that whole 70s timeline. So
that was kind of Ringo's vibe too, wasn't it? Like when you look at the Beatles and kind of what they did and what they brought to the team, Ringo, to me, always seemed like he was the one who's like, guys, let's just have fun and let's go crazy, and kind of like brought the other Beatles out in that way of like, let's not just do all the mainstream stuff. Let's do Yellow Submarine and I Am the Wall. You know what I mean? Like that kind of stuff. And you're like, sure, why not? See where it goes.
Yeah, very, very fun. Very, very just like going with the flow. It's like, yeah, okay, I'll do what I got to do with that. Yeah. It's a lot of fun. And I know you said so what are some of your favorite band now that I've run out of really official questions, but like some of the favorite bands you have? I mean, it sounds like Queen is kind of a big one if I'm picking that up.
So I'll say this is I didn't really grow up with a lot of music, not because it was like religious or anything like that. A lot of people kind of like the music that their parents like. That's usually how they get introduced to certain bands and things like that. And my parents never were a big fan of music. So growing up, the things that I got to really first start liking was Elvis, because my dad really liked Elvis. Was like the Monkees. So I, as a kid,
Yeah.
I literally knew of the Monkees before I knew of the Beatles, because of like that kind of thing, whether my dad had it like in a CD collection for random things. So I really didn't kind of getting into music until I got really into like high school and started hanging out with friends that would listen to different kinds of music, a punk rock, alt rock, different kind of hip hop, things like that. That's when I started to like, oh, I really like music. And I think the other person who kind of had an influence would be my grandpa, who loved Dean and Frank and kind of music from his generation. So every time I'd go up there, I'd listen to, he'd put on like Frank, he'd have vinyl, Frank, he'd have a Dean record, he'd have like Hank Williams, Johnny Cash. So like all of those people. So I kind of in a weird amalgamation kind of grew up with all these different influences, because I never really had a direct source of, hey, this is my introduction into music. It was always kind of picking and choosing from different people, if that kind of makes sense.
No, it does. I've got a Frank CD somewhere around here. I got 2 of them. I got a Greatest Hits and "L.A. Is My Lady" from 1984. Kind of a disco new wave tinged covers version song.
Sure.
It's a strange one to have, but it's kind of fun to see towards the latter half of his career.
Right.
I got to say, well, you know what? First of all, Jackson, amazing to have you on. I do want to have you on back. As we're kind of wrapping things up a little bit here now, what about like where could people find you? Go ahead and spill some of the links, upcoming things. The stage is yours.
Yeah, so the best way to see me is weekdays, 9 p.m. Central. I have my TikTok channel. I go live pretty much every weekday. Sometimes, like you said, real life gets in the way, things like that happen, but I try to do weekdays. And then TikTok for sure. And I'm trying to get better about streaming it through different services as well. So sometimes, whether it's an Instagram, whether going YouTube live, different like that, trying to have different channels, maybe Twitch, trying to really broaden the horizon, because if you all of a sudden start putting all your eggs in one basket and that basket, that app closes for some reason, well, there goes all the followers and all the work that you have there. So typically those are the platforms that you can see. Trying to get better as well about posting clips, posting interviews. I'm sure you get this as a content creator, but editing usually takes about, at least for me, 5 times longer than I expect it to. And so trying to get the clips, trying to get the videos just right, it's like, oh, I'll set aside a couple hours on a Saturday, and all of a sudden that 2 hours turns into 5 hours and I'm halfway done. And I'm like, shoot, I am nowhere close to where I thought I was going to be. So trying to, get better there, but really TikTok is the main place going live. That's what I'm really trying to promote, because I think it's, one of those ways that you can get to know me a little bit more, the guest, and just, have fun for just a little bit, making late night shows, fun again.
That is awesome. That's certainly 100%. I had a lot of fun, obviously going on yours, and thank you again, because that definitely drives traffic. And this, of course, I always love to return the favor. Again, we're all, we all have our real lives, like you said. We all have our things, but again, just to wrap things up, Jackson, thank you so much for being on. Also, I know folks can contact you via also your social platforms, which we'll link to below, to certainly be a guest on the show. Certainly well worth it. I had a lot of fun. I felt like I was relaxed in, someone's living room. I hope you felt the same way coming here.
Of course. No,
Excellent.
This is great. Like you said, it's like you're sitting down with a friend, in a dining room, at a bonfire, a beer, wherever you find at ease. This was great. This was a lot of fun. I enjoyed it.
Well, you know what? In honor of Craig Ferguson, as we wrap this up, we're going to give you 100 million points.
Yes, 100 million.
Sure, right there, 100 million
Whoa,
points.
Yeah, I did it. 100 million
and now
points.
We're just going to go ahead and tear it up and just say it doesn't matter, but you still get the 100 million points.
Yeah.
Jackson, thank you so much, everyone. I appreciate your support. Obviously, the folks that have been following me for a while, the new folks, please keep tuning in for the different content, especially the Beatles related content. And of course, I'm glad we got the questions. You got 100 million points on the quiz. You know what? It's never, believe me, it's never about, oh, you don't know this. No, nothing like that at all.
No,
Believe me,
I agree.
it's sharing knowledge, it's sharing fun. So everybody, definitely check out the Late Talk Show. Go ahead and check that out on TikTok. Subscribe to it. Show your love and support. And see everybody in the next show. Take care.